The following is a special presentation on CW7 Arizona.
Welcome to Before You Vote. I'm Mike Broomhead. This CW7 special program is here to help you, the voter, understand the 2024 primary election. We'll be talking with candidates and data analysts to give you insight into who and what is on the ballot. This 2024 election season is covering the presidential race, a U.S. Senate race, as well as some local and state offices. And we're here to break it all down for you until the general election on November 5th. Today on the show, we are talking with Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer about election safety and Arizona's new election timeline. Then Mike Noble is here to talk about how voters in Arizona feel about the upcoming presidential and U.S. Senate races and what issues are the most concerned about. Plus, former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer is here to give her thoughts on if she thinks the Arizona legislature will flip this year. We're bringing you all the information you need to know next. We'll be back in exactly 60 seconds. All right, welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us now is Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer. Thanks for doing this again.
Thank you very much for having me back.
So let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Talk about what you do. What is your job in the recorder's office when it comes to elections?
I'm in charge of recording public documents, which doesn't have anything to do with elections, but it's how I get my title. And then I'm responsible for voter registration. We have about 2.4 million voters in Maricopa County, making up about 62% of the voting population of Arizona, and making us actually the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States behind Los Angeles County. And then I'm responsible for early voting, and that's divided by state statute between the recorder and the Board of Supervisors. And elections are administered at the county level. So we have 15 counties in Arizona. So Maricopa, the recorder, and the Board of Supervisors administer elections in Maricopa County.
So when it comes to early voting, and I want to talk about this because I know there's been a lot of questions and people talking this. What happens? Someone says, I want to be on the early voting list. They get a ballot in the mail. What happens? Can you walk us through it?
Even before that, it all starts with voter registration. You have to be registered 29 days before an election. And without being a registered voter, we can't send you a ballot. You can't show up to vote in person if you're not a registered voter. And there are certain checks that go into that. But once you've accomplished that, then you have this buffet of options in front of you. You can get a ballot by mail and you can return it by mail. You can get a ballot by mail and you can return it at a voting location. You can show up to vote in person early, or you can show up on election day and vote in person. So you have all of those at your disposal. Now, if you are on what we call the active early voting list, you will automatically be sent a mail ballot 27 days before the election day. So actually for the presidential preference election, that day was today, the 21st of February.
So you get those ballots go out.
That's right, and it goes out in this yellow envelope, and this will be addressed to you as a registered voter, and it will have some information up here, and then inside this yellow envelope, you'll have your ballot, you'll have an instruction booklet, and you'll have, importantly, this green return envelope.
That's the thing that's most important to me, because the signature that they've got to verify, all that information, when you get that, it notifies the voter we've received it.
Perfect. So we don't accept just loose ballots back. You know, if somebody drops off just a shoebox of ballots or something like that. No, they have to come back in the assigned return envelope to you as a voter. Now that importantly has both a barcode and it has the signature box. The first thing we do when we get this back is we scan that barcode. That's not only what allows you to track your ballot through all stages of the process, but it's also what allows us to track if you voted or not. So as soon as we scan that, then we load a vote to your profile. So if you showed up in person, then you wouldn't be able to vote twice. Also, we take an image of this signature in the box and we compare it with all of your past signatures that we've ever captured. And only once we've signature verified that can we then slice this open, and then a bipartisan team will take that ballot out.
So, in the rare occurrence that a signature is not verified in that first glance, what happens next?
So it's rare as a percentage, but in terms of raw number, we actually do quite a bit of that. So in the 2022 general election, we had about 14,000 ballot packets where we said, we can't verify your signature. The entry-level person couldn't do it, the manager couldn't do it. So then what we do is we try to cure the ballot. That means we call you, we text you, we email you in any way, shape, or form. That's also why we ask for your phone number, again, on this green return envelope, so we can call you and say, hey, is this really Mike living at 111 East Elm Street? Oh, it is? Okay, great. Mike, what's the last four of your social security so I can confirm that's you? Did you send back this ballot packet? Because we weren't able to confirm that signature. So that's called the curing process.
And so once that happens?
Once that happens, then that counts as we have now validated your identity, so we can send it again to that bipartisan team that then slices it open. So importantly, if we never validate your envelope, we cannot move it forward. And so that's an important check in the early voting process, and only once that is done does the ballot get taken out.
So with all that processes that have happened and the questions that have gone on, are you confident? I mean, I'm asking you a question that's obvious, but you're confident that things are being done the right way and people that are voting are having their votes counted?
You know, I appreciate programs like this because people always have questions, and that's natural, especially as more attention has been paid to the subject. We love to answer them. We're good about responding to emails. We're good about responding to phone calls. But we're also doing things to continually improve the process. Now, unlike some states, Arizona's been doing no excuse mail voting since 1992. So each year, I think we're getting better at it. One of the things that we're doing this year is simply adding more space to our facility and adding more bodies, such that when all of those people return their early ballots pretty late in the game, we can hopefully, without compromising the integrity of the program, be doing that signature verification, be doing that ballot checking in a faster manner.
So last question is about potential voters, because I still submit to everyone that we need more people in the process.
Right.
If somebody wants to register to vote, what's the fastest and easiest way for them to register to vote?
Go to servicearizona.com. So that takes you through the Arizona Motor Vehicle Division. It's easy to sign up for it. It's a quick process. You're right. We don't have automatic voter registration in Arizona. So it doesn't mean that as soon as you get a driver's license, you also get registered to vote. Some states do that. So we actually have, of our 7.1 million people in Arizona, a few 100,000 who are 18 years old, a United States citizen, not a felon, who are eligible to vote but have not registered to vote. And so they need to do that at least 29 days before the election that they want to participate in. So for the March presidential preference election, that's lapsed. But if you register today, you'll be eligible to vote in the July primary and, of course, the November general election.
I always appreciate the time. You're always a great guest, and I think it's valuable information. So thanks for doing it again.
Thank you very much.
Stephen Richard joining us for a few minutes, and we'll be right back. Coming up, how do Arizona voters feel about the upcoming races? Mike Noble is breaking it down next. Plus, later in the show, former Governor Jan Brewer reveals if she thinks the state legislature will flip. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. This is our Tracking Arizona segment. This is where we find out what Arizona voters are feeling about the big issues throughout this election cycle. Joining us once again is Mike Noble from Noble Predictive Insights. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks for having me back, Mike.
So I want to talk about the important issues. What are the issues in this election cycle that are most important to Arizona voters?
You know what, Mike, that's a great question. So the top issues this year are actually very different from last year. But looking at right now, the number one issue for voters is actually jobs and the economy. But when you look more specifically at it, it's actually really being driven by inflation. And the next two highest issues is immigration and abortion. So when you look at it, for the general election, inflation is going to be definitely the number one issue, but for immigration, it's going to really benefit Republicans, and abortion, Democrats, that's going to benefit them, and you're going to see them leaning into that issue. But education and healthcare are not in the top 3 this cycle.
So could those change around if the numbers at the border kind of get a little better, if the inflation numbers go down? Will we see a switch of this, or do you think this is going to be fairly consistent this year?
I think it's consistent for now, but to your point, yeah, absolutely. If, let's say, they pass a comprehensive immigration package, I think you'll see immigration really tamped down as a priority issue for voters because something's actually been done to address it. And so it really depends on some of these policy shifts, but if Congress, the way they're currently operating, which is currently doing next to nothing up there, you could absolutely see these issues persisting now until Election Day.
So let's do the same thing with inflation. A spending bill, we know that they've left the House without a spending bill. There's a possibility of a shutdown. We know that's a Congress issue, but does that affect the presidential race?
Yeah, it will absolutely affect the presidential race. They're trying to do everything. They're not blind. They see the polling just like we have, is that inflation is a huge pain point for American voters right now, especially here with Arizona voters. And so they're going to try to do everything they can to tamp that down. However, again, how much ability they have to actually reduce costs on these services, I think it's going to be a tough issue to solve for them from now until Election Day.
Last question very quickly. Is the independent voter registration still #1, and is it growing in its lead?
So independents are #1 in Maricopa County, where 6 out of 10 likely voters derive from. They're still not #1 overall statewide, but they're getting close. But what you're seeing in the trends here and other places, that independents are the fastest growing group. So it's not Republicans getting the fastest or biggest, nor the Democrats. It's absolutely independents right now. So they will be. It's just a matter of time and when that will be.
Matt, I got to tell you, the information we get from you, and I know we're going to have more throughout this election season, is going to be invaluable. So as always, thanks for your time, Mike, and we appreciate you being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Mike Noble with Noble Predictive Insights. This is Before You Vote, and we'll be right back. Coming up, will the Arizona State Legislature flip? Find out what former Governor Jan Brewer thinks when we come back. This is Before You Vote. All right, welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us is former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer. Thanks again for doing this year.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
The election's ahead of us. This is the election year. It seems like the cycle never ends anymore. But you spent a lot of time as a candidate for different offices. Let's talk about the process of this. Because when do voters really, the majority of voters really start paying attention to the candidates?
Oh, I think probably April, maybe April, they start paying attention, and it really gets geared up by then, and then it's day and night everywhere, you know, and certainly it's spreads your time thinly if you have a statewide election. It's not as bad as if you're in a legislative district, but no, you're out there. And I think when you first run, I think you work really, really hard because you want to win so badly, and then you kind of get wind beneath your wings, and you kind of know where the places are where you can gather the votes. And you don't want to keep going back to the same places. You want to go where people aren't as involved to get their votes,
right,
because those are the people we really need to encourage. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are very interested in an election, and then there's people that don't give a shoot.
And what's funny about that is leading up to it, it seems like you go to district meetings and the people that are involved, that's your base.
Right.
But like you said, as the election year goes on, you want to get to the maybes. You want to get to so that's the bigger clubs. And I've seen people run for countywide office, and it seems like 2-3 different events every night, 5-6 nights a week.
Oh.
I can't even imagine what that's like for you for a statewide election.
Oh, yeah, no, it's hard. It really is. You have to have a lot of stamina, and you have to have a lot of support from your family and from your team. If you've got a big team or a little team, it takes everybody, you know. And I'm a real grassroots campaigner. I think that's how our elections are won. And so I went 7 days a week. I mean, I was, you know, from one place to the other. I was in Sierra Vista one night, and I drove all the way to Lake Havasu City that night for a dinner by myself.
I remember when I first got involved politically at all, you were Secretary of State.
Oh.
And talk about grassroots, we would be at events together during the Bush campaign.
Yes.
Same thing, little tiny events all over the state, and it would seem like I would show up and there you'd be, and then I'd be at the next one and there you'd be. You were even then, when you were campaigning for other people, it was about the grassroots.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if you shake somebody's hand and you tell them about yourself, and then if you say, can I count on your vote? And they say yes, you got them. And I would never leave an event without going to every table and shaking everybody's hand. There could be 500 people in there. I would not leave until I went to that table and or had my petitions signed. I carried my own petitions everywhere I went until I filed them. No, it's grassroots. People want that interaction. They want to get to know you so they can say to their friends at coffee the next morning that we met a candidate and this is who he or she is, you know, so it becomes personal.
Do you think the issues pretty much remain the same? Voters vote with their wallets in Arizona, state border is still a big issue. Do you think those issues stay consistent, or have things changed since your time in office?
No, they stay consistent. It's it's the economy, it's the border, it's education and health. I mean, that pretty much covers it all in some sense of it. You know, there's always those other little things that you take care of, but those are the major.
When you look at the difference between when you were the governor and now, there is a much slimmer margin of a majority for the Republicans. What does that do? So Governor Hobbs is a Democrat, but what does she have to do with such a slim majority? Does it change the way the governor has to behave?
I think so. I think that's when we say compromise. You're not going to get anything done unless you compromise, because I mean she's over to the left and they're over to the right, and there's no give or take. I mean, it's one vote, man. You lose it all. So there's a lot of compromising going on. When I was governor, I had majorities everywhere. I worked for them all. There was no the highest member, I think, was somebody that was the majority leader in the minority leader in the Senate, and other than that, we had all the offices.
What's funny about that is, not to go too far back, but there was a time when you were governor that even though there was that big majority, there was a lot of wrangling going on. You had a battle on your hands.
I had a battle. I mean, these are people that I had known forever, people that I had known before they were in the legislature and before I was in the legislature. I mean, and they got really ugly, but I had to stand my ground, and I always have to remember what my mother told me. Doing the right thing almost always means doing the hard thing, and boy was she right, because it was a battle, because I had a $3 billion budget deficit. $3 billion out of a $9 billion budget. Mm-hmm. And when I went into the legislature, it hadn't even crossed over to $1 billion back in 1982. We couldn't even say billion.
Which is incredible now when you look at where Arizona's at now compared to when what you inherited. That was a difficult time.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about elections themselves. Do you still get contacted by voters? Because I believe we need fresh blood, not being elected, but in people that are voting. I think we need new people to have new ideas and to elect new people to offices.
Absolutely. People still call me and we talk politics. There are people that move in, or you meet them at church, or you meet them at the golf course, or you meet them at the drugstore. They certainly recognize me for whatever the reason, and they ask me about certain things. But because of Arizona's growth, I mean, the growth has been so large that you have all those people coming in from everywhere. And a lot of them are coming in from California because they want out of that silly state. Some of them are coming in and changing what we want in Arizona. So it's, you have to give them your philosophy and what you think they should hear, and so that they can come along and do the right thing for Arizona.
What do you say to candidates?
In regards to...
When they come to you and say, I want to run for an office, do you have any advice for me?
Oh, yes. I think, I always tell them I think it's very admirable that people want to get into the public square and give up their time away from their family and to take the heat. It's not easy. Everybody's shooting at you. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So there you go. But, the thing is that you got to know that it's not a part-time job. It is a full-time job, because you're spoken to everywhere you go. If you're shopping, if you go to the beauty shop, whatever, there's always questions. And if you want to be a good representative, you go to all the meetings you're invited to. You do all the things you're supposed to do.
Listen, I always appreciate time with you because of your knowledge and the time you've been here. I appreciate you coming back every year, and I hope we can talk again in the future. It's just so great to catch up with you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you.
Governor Jan Brewer joining us for just a few moments. We'll be back. Welcome back to Before You Vote. A thank you to Stephen Richer, Maricopa County Recorder, former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer, and Mike Noble for being a part of the show today. If you miss an interview or you want to rewatch any of them, head over to aztv.com/vote. It's our goal this election season to make sure you're the most informed voter you can be. We'll be doing this every week until the November election, and we hope you can be a part of these shows. And just as a reminder, the presidential preference election is on March 19th. Early voting has already begun. You can head over to our website for any voter information that you might need. Now have a great Sunday and join us again next week on Before You Vote. To help you this election season, head over to cw7arizona.com, check out your voter status, register to vote, as well as all other voter resources.